Welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury.
Good evening and welcome if you are listening and watching along live. Having spent the weekend being battered by Storm being battered by some kind of storm, we thought we'd venture out this evening and travel just up the A27 to meet our friends from the Rainbow Coalition of Havant.
Yeah, indeed. It was 23, 22 that we had them on. So since we last spoke to them, they've taken control of the council. I'm sure that had nothing to do with us, and is entirely due to their hard work. But shall I excite our audience with a list of who we've got?
Lovely.
Okay, so we are.
I think there's a contradiction there.
Easy. So we are joined from Team Lib Dem. We've got Paul Gray, who's the councillor for Hayling West. He's the cabinet lead for commercial and chair of licensing committee. With Mark Coates from Labour, Hayling East, chair of the human resources committee. We've got Philippa Gray of the Lib Dems of Bedhampton, who is the deputy leader of the council and cabinet lead for finance. And we have Grainne Rason, who is from the Green Party and a councillor in Emsworth, and is the cabinet lead for environment, water quality and climate change champion. So good evening and welcome to you all. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi guys.
Hello. So welcome back. It's good to have you all back and reporting on what's going on in those not really kind of far-flung fields to the east of us, but you're a bit down the A27. So let's crack straight on. Coalition, bit of a swear word to some. 6 months in, how's this shaping up, Philippa? If I can come to you first on that one, please.
Thank you, Simon. It's great to be here. It works really well on the ground. We worked together in opposition to start with and found we'd got a common approach, common understanding of Havant's problems. And moving into running the administration has actually felt surprisingly smooth. And it's only occasionally when I sort of step out into the wider world that I meet other politicians and they go, "Whoa, what are you up to?" And you pick up some sort of negative vibes, and I'm not really sure why. Life's too challenging to worry about who belongs to which party. It's finding a coalition, working together with people who share your common views.
Conformity and ignorance, Philippa. Conformity and ignorance is why you get the negative response from them. They feel challenged by it.
I wouldn't accuse anyone of ignorance. I do expect them to listen to my arguments if they've challenged me, though.
Okay. Well, there are many views, but good to know that it's landing well, and that you're finding that working for you. Anything anyone else wants to add on that one? Grainne?
Yep, I'm very happy. Right, I think coalitions, although people don't recognise it, are the best thing. I come from a country where coalitions have been there from early days. I think it's a great way, and it's what's working on Havant is it means that a wider group of people's voices are being heard. It leads to better decisions. And one of the characteristics of our council and our coalition is that we're constantly reaching out to the other parties. I don't think they really believe it yet, but it is totally genuine. Mm-hmm. And that is how we're in a place where there are far, far too many important challenges for us to be bickering about the small stuff. There's too much big stuff to really crack on, and we are working together, and we must work together. So that's my put in.
Okay.
Like that.
Fantastic. Like that. Anyone else?
Happy to say something if that's all right. After saying I'll be quiet this evening, Simon, I do apologise. Straight in there, but I want to go back.
We want you on to actually say some things. There's little point in us inviting guests on that stays silent. That's a bit of an awkward interview, to be honest.
I'm not just here to look pretty then. I'm too old. I'm 50 now, so not anymore. I think that we can go back to 2023, and actually when you did have us on, and we were all members of that 7 who made a little bit of a wave then. And of course, we had the all-out election that was very dramatic in 2024. But we came into what was previous. There was 2 or 3, I think, before that, and a couple of years previous to that, been entirely Conservative. I thought we did quite well, made some waves. I saw the importance of having a strong opposition. I can't believe that we operated without one before. And now it's the Conservatives' turn, much to their chagrin, to do that job. And it's really important. They offer scrutiny and balance, and hopefully some pretty firm and well-researched opposition. And we've, I think, come from that place that it was exactly what's already been said by Philippa and by Grainne. It was a really smooth transition, wasn't it, into what has been a pretty good operation. The only thing is, of course, we've got a lot of people that are still learning. We've got to understand all the pipeline, haven't we? And
we have. Sorry, I was just reading a message from your mum coming up on your phone there, literally.
Yeah. She said, "Good luck."
She did. Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what Mark said. This is, and you guys know this, and we know a lot of your listeners, they know this. This didn't happen overnight. So it was a continuation of something that's been ongoing for a long time. And all I would add, actually, I think as a sort of anecdote is, one of the guys that got elected on Hayling last.
Oh, for some reason, Paul, we've lost your audio. Was there anything anyone else wanted to say on that one?
Well, we could talk forever, but the opposition are learning to be a better opposition as well. But a coalition is a place of strength. It does take people time to get to realise that actually, working together does give you massive advantage in time when people learn. Actually, compromises are what we all need. It means that nobody gets everything, but everybody gets something. That's got to be right.
It sounds like a sensible and pragmatic way to run a borough council, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess, Philippa, just interesting that the Conservatives had run the council pretty much almost unopposed for many, many years. How do you find the Conservatives, and I think there are a couple of Reform councillors, how are they interacting with you? There was this, we haven't quite got all of the colours of the rainbow working together in unity, but are they still working, alongside you, or is there something different going on there?
As Grainne says, they're sort of having to learn to be in opposition. Reform councillors are having to learn to be councillors. Sometimes they do support us. Sometimes we get a bit of dispiriting opposition where we feel it's not really going to achieve much. But I think they have to, again, learn to be in opposition. They're not turning up to all the committee meetings asking difficult questions yet, which surprised me. They will challenge us in council, which is where the main theatre happens. But I'm sort of expecting them to turn up to cabinet and governance and actually start asking questions. But let's see what happens.
I'm going to put in something there, Philippa. I went to ONS as you did, and I thought that was a really, really solid meeting, and that it was really people working together, all looking at, is this the right thing to do? I think there's a lot of nervousness and suspicion initially. I think that is my sense is that it's beginning to ease, and I realise no, we're not rabbit Marxists or whatever they think we are. They're actually just people like them who want to serve our residents as best we can.
Thank you, Grainne.
The ONS meeting was last week that Grainne mentioned. The recordings are on the Havant Borough Council website. I do recommend it. There was a really interesting debate. As Grainne says, really positive. They dug deep. They've had a discussion threw light on some fairly complex subjects.
That's brilliant. Do we know if we've got Paul back?
I think we've got them. Back. Paul and Mark.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm getting blamed. Why is it my name when it fails?
It was just Paul. We were looking to come
speaking.
to you. Yeah, we were looking to come to you.
I mean, we can blame you if you want, but yeah, it was just that you were the person speaking. That's all.
So, Paul, as you're back, perhaps we can address the next question to yourself, which is around business and what struggles are the businesses of Havant talking to you about, and what are you able to do to help?
If I'm honest with you guys, this answer is a little bit generic, really. In that it's really, to be honest, a macroeconomic question. What are the struggles for businesses, basically? I'll tell you now, I originally came up with what you'll appreciate was a flippant answer, which was Brexit and 14 years of Tories. Then I asked AI, and it said the same thing. In all seriousness, what is our economy facing? I mean, it's facing geopolitical crises. It is facing everything that everyone's aware of. So I'm sorry, it's not a particularly exciting answer, but I don't think it's particularly different. You have the same economic circumstances here as you do anywhere else. I could talk to you more about flood risks of businesses on Hayling or something like that. But why are labour costs increased? Why have material costs increased? Et cetera, et cetera. Why the situation with global fuel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is not a Havant Borough Council specific question.
Well, I think that those things are subjective, and some of them are obvious and true in terms of increasing cost. But I guess surely the role of Havant Borough Council is to find niche and agile ways to support the local business. I read something on the Havant website about pop-up shops in Waterlooville. So I guess it would seem that there are some things that can be done locally to support business.
Yeah, absolutely. But that, Simon, with the greatest respect, is a different question. The challenges they're facing is one thing. The solutions, absolutely. Pop-up shops is an excellent example, and it is all about those innovative solutions about how you can help businesses. But those are answers to a problem, not the problem in themselves, and not the instigator of the problems. We could talk, for example, about rundown high streets. Well, what's behind rundown high streets? Well, lacking of long-term investment for a long period of time, a changing demographic cycle, a changing shopping habits, the internet, etc., etc. Those are not Havant Borough Council-driven problems, but the council will do what it can to find solutions where it can.
Yeah, so I guess that was the second part of the question, Paul, which is what are you doing to help?
So
I can, I can give you an answer there. Yeah, there's a problem in some of the shopping areas with shoplifting. I don't think this is confined to Havant, but we've been working with the local police. They are great. I had a real eye-opening experience last week when we walked around Havant Shopping Centre with Donna Jones and a couple of uniformed police officers. And boy, did I get some looks. They clearly thought I would either been arrested or was being escorted to do some sort of citizen service, whatever you get sentenced to if you
you didn't have an orange jumpsuit.
get found guilty.
Community, Philippa, community service.
Community service, thank you.
I'm not speaking from experience either.
No, no Lib Dem has ever received an ASBO.
I'm trying.
Anyway, it was really good. We got to talk to the shop managers, shop assistants, about how their problems, how they work together. There's always new technology coming along, some really clever stuff now in the way of body cameras that report straight back, and you press a button and it goes through to police headquarters and they can witness the shoplifting in real time. Also saw the local bobbies interacting with the public. Some of them got their friends, people they recognised, people who sneaked past them, obviously didn't want to be seen. So yeah, we're out and about looking at the details of the local problems. We've got regeneration going on in Waterlooville, Havant's coming along, and we're not going to ignore Lee Park. Just trying to get the place cleaned up, look tidier. Getting rid of the pigeons would be a good move, but I'm not sure that's something that's within the gift of the council.
So
sorry, Ian, could I just mention, because it's a good point about crime and what have you, and actually Mark sat here next to me, might have a tiny bit to offer about that, because he managed to get policing on Hayling increased an awful lot, didn't you?
Well, I think we have got to give some. I know everyone hates to, but we have got to give some credit to Donna Jones there, who who does definitely have her strengths.
Yeah, because again, that is a nationwide problem, but it is something that, yes, you have to tackle on a not by case basis, but obviously you have to tackle at a more local level. And it is a recurring theme that we have here. That is absolutely a challenge. Again, it is nationwide, I know, but when you get reports from local shops of literally people just walk in and just take with impunity now, because police levels are so low that they know there is basically very, very low chance of anyone actually intervening and stopping. But yeah.
Perfect. Grainne, I was just going to come to you because
I'm going to come thing because I represent Emsworth, and Emsworth stands out in the borough, along with Hayling, as someone that has a high level of local shops. One of the advantages they have is a lot of them own the property, so they don't have to face the challenges they do elsewhere, which is high rents. Because if you talk to people who are small businesses, they will say what is stopping them, what is handicapping them is the high rents. There's a drop in footfall. I think COVID taught people to stay at home and order online. It reinforced something that was already happening. I agree with the shoplifting. That is a major issue. The police do beg people to please report, because people feel, oh, well, they won't do anything because they want an instant answer. And it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It is a very, very tough environment for all businesses. But I can't emphasize enough that local businesses really are on their knees in terms of they're facing every single challenge coming, and they don't have the resources of the big boys. They haven't got a big bank behind them, and they really are in it. And we are doing everything possible really to support our local high streets with the regen program. It's very imaginative. What's happening in Waterlooville is transformative. That's just one example where things are really can be seen and are taking place. And we also have a pretty good team of officers who are very proactive in getting places filled where we can. But a lot of people don't realise, oh, that's not filled because, well, we don't actually own it. You know, it's not our property. We just can't do anything about it. We can't make people rent out their shops.
I guess final question just to pitch in is many areas are knocking down their high streets. They have accepted defeat, for want of a better term, and that the age of the high street is over. The internet has won. Any thoughts in terms of how that?
Oh, well, Grainne, you've had a go.
I'm just going to get in, and then everybody else can say. What I noticed about Havant in particular, compared to, say, Fareham, we have a relatively small high street, and it has enabled us to look like we're full. If you go to Fareham, it is like a man who's lost half his teeth. The place is full of gaps. It looks absolutely awful. We're really, really lucky that we don't have that gap. We have some gaps, but, relatively not that many. So, we have that advantage, and, we're agile and imaginative, and really, I think, going forward, we're not going to knock down the high street. That's not the way forward. The pendulum will swing back.
We're case in point, we're not knocking down the shopping centre, where an awful lot of people are currently knocking down their shopping centres. And you mentioned agility there. That's exactly it. We're keeping space for retail, but we're also looking at a lot of dead space there to use for accommodation and what have you. So the idea that there's a sort of binary, the internet as one or the high street as one, I think is a little bit misleading, because there is going to be a certain amount of demand for local shops, etc., not online shopping. But we have got capacity to use what we've got that hasn't been used as well as it could in the past.
Yeah, and I think that the human condition is another thing to consider. Whilst I think it's quite reasonable to adapt and overcome, and to not just out of a sense of nostalgia continue to keep these shops open at great expense, but you're going to have to shrink them. But if we see them disappear altogether, you're going to lose an important community asset. I was talking to a veteran the other day who's just moved to Hayling in April. His main interaction is with an excellent coffee shop, local coffee shop, where the owner's really forthright and bubbly and entertaining and interesting and speaks for a long time to customers. We've got a lot of business owners like that. That's a lifeline for him, absolute lifeline. And I think that community aspect can't be lost. Whilst I'm happy to see them shrink out of necessity and because of that's just the face of business evolution, I would be appalled to see them disappear completely.
But actually that goes back to the original question again. It is macroeconomic. There are an awful lot of small businesses that are simply not experiencing what you might perceive as a meritocratic level playing field in the economy, because you have huge organizations, huge multinational corporations that are paying less tax than a small cafe on Hayling Island, for example.
Yeah.
That again, that's not Havant specific, but providing that level field is absolutely essential to those services, to the local community, etc., etc.
Perfect. Simon.
Okay, so thank you very much. That was a good one. So we did invite contributions and suggestions from the public when we did our social media. So one of the things that did come up quite a lot was stuff about water, and either the securing of clean water, or the storing of it, or the treatment and disposal, or I was going to say excretion of it, but that's probably part of the problem. But the pumping out of it into the environment. So what's kind of happening there? We keep hearing things about this reservoir. What's all that about?
Right. Well, if I can pick that up initially, given my title, you sort of said what would be wrong with having nice, clean, calm water, nature, all the rest of it. Well, that's exactly what we were going to get when it was passed by the council in 21. However, 3 days later, Southern Water come up with their plan, which is to take sewage effluent from Fud's Farm, recycle it by a process called reverse osmosis, and then pump it up to the reservoir, which kind of sounds, recycling is really great. However, there are a few questions around this. Reverse osmosis is not a cure-all. It's not, and I have, right from the start, I've had a really big concern. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. That's never clever. You should have more than one strategy. But the way it's being proceeded is, this or nothing. And I don't think people realize just how technically challenging this is and how expensive it is, because actually the cost of producing 1 billion litres of water by reverse osmosis isn't that much cheaper than tankering it from Norway. So that kind of puts a context on the cost of this. And it's an expensive scheme. And I would say, like, when the water companies say it's all Ofwat's fault, well, I agree with them. Some of it is Ofwat is not fit for purpose. It has been evolving into a government body which cheap water, but not sustainable water. And we're now starting to pay the price, which is, as you pointed out, is all the sewage going out into the sea. The infrastructure there has been left because they're not motivated by regulation to actually put funds and resources into maintenance. And that's, so Southern Water and all the water companies have the same two issues. Now, there's some water companies that actually get a lot closer to getting it right. Anglican Water, where they're genuinely scarce of water, are much closer to solving this. Now, Southern Water have been dragged, in my feeling, kicking and screaming to the table to say you need to do something about this sewage going out into the harbours. And people have been some people have been on this for years and years and years, but a lot of people just say, oh, that's why I'm getting sick. This is what's going on. It's been a slow burn, but it's got a lot of momentum now. Now, as far as Havant Borough Council, their input into both the reservoir as is only on things called reserve matters. So we can tinker at the edges, but Southern Water's actual plan to use the reservoir in this new way isn't down to Havant Borough Council. It is a direct consent order, which means it goes directly to the government, and God knows what's going to happen there. I wouldn't like to put any bets on it. But as far as, taking the sewage out of the harbours, well, that is a national problem. We are lobbying. The council is working with Southern Water. So we've got Beach Boy and now Rivers and Seas. That all came out of discussions that were going on with the officers. Now, it doesn't address the problem, but at least sort of recognises that it's a problem that needs to be solved. And believe me, that's actual progress from where we were even a couple of years ago to get to there. And, a lot of that has come down actually to the community, but with the community, we can start strengthening that voice. And it's a letter has been written to DEFRA by the leader saying, we need something better to happen. In fact, I said to them, actually, do you know what? Steve Reed, the DEFRA guy, should come to Havant because we've got all the water problems here. There's no water problem that you're not finding in Havant. Come to Havant and you'll really get the full picture because it's complex.
I'm surprised Alan Mack hasn't asked him. Can I just say, chaps, I wonder if that's one of the reasons you asked us on here. First of all, of course, it's the Rainbow Coalition, see how that's going. But this is massive, this topic. We're talking about £1 billion piece of infrastructure, and it'll be the first of its kind in the UK. And I think there's only a second or third in Europe. I know there's one in Belgium. So it will hit national headlines, and obviously we're hearing it here first. I've taken my lead 100% from Grainne, who I thought was excellent there. I'm worried about the consequences, not just the upheaval in terms of all the pipes that will be laid, but it does feel a bit like Southern Water are just trying to add £1 billion piece of kit to their portfolio instead of fixing the leaks that cost them. Is it 100 million litres a day, Grainne, or something like that? 19%, nearly 20% of all the potable water or the captured and treated water is lost. So we're talking about a fifth, and they're only looking at 2050. Is it? They're trying to decrease that by 50%. Well, actually, if they solved all of that existing infrastructure, then problems, then they wouldn't have an issue. They wouldn't have a need for this. So it's odd that they want to do something that causes massive energy expenditure. It definitely doesn't fit in with. And by the way, the Greens climate emergency they declared, and I have to say, people who on Facebook and obviously on Nextdoor and Facebook, we had certain people who maybe didn't see the big picture going, "Oh, climate emergency," laughy face. It was perfectly timed for this, because what Southern Water are trying to do when they hijacked that Portsmouth Water project was actually create an abundance of issues in terms of smashing their own carbon net zero targets for 2050, let alone ours. So I think Grainne has been excellent on this, and you can see the Rainbow Coalition working here. She really has, and I've taken my lead from her, and I think a lot of us have.
Yeah, well said.
Can I put my nerd hat on and clarify a few things?
Sure, go for it.
Southern Water would love you to think that by introducing reverse osmosis and recycling sewage, it will reduce the sewage going into the harbour. They never actually explain this bit, but it won't. Sewage goes into the harbour when there's so much rainfall that Bud's Farm can't cope and just cannot take any more water in. The sewage recycling will only take what comes out of Bud's Farm and process it further. So it will do nothing to increase the capacity of Bud's Farm or stop the overflow of sewage into the harbour, which is really annoying. Now, it took me a long time to understand the next bit, but as far as I can tell, when water companies were privatised, the business model that was set up was meant to encourage them to invest in infrastructure, I think in the hopes that they might actually start fixing the water mains and fixing these leaks. But instead, Southern Water have taken the opportunity to come up with a really expensive solution to a problem. There is a real problem that the South will maybe run out of drinking water in a couple of decades' time. Southern Water have come up with a really expensive solution that will allow them to borrow money from their parent company and put the cost of servicing that loan onto the customers. So Paul can explain this, I'm sure, but that is how big corporations make money, by borrowing from their parent companies and charging their customers the interest.
I think you've probably explained it perfectly well. I mean, that's exactly what's going on. Yeah.
Let's remind people that the parent company is a bank.
Yeah, exactly.
Which increased the debt of Thames Water when they owned it from 3.4 billion to 10.8 in 7 years. And the thing that I find hardest to forgive is they took £1 billion out of people's pensions.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's no moral excuse for that.
Yeah.
If I
I
can
mean,
just
go far enough up any business chain, and ultimately you're talking to bankers. That's where you end up. But
I guess just and maybe this is a naive question, because we've covered the sewage issues and we've covered the water issues a couple of times before, and many things that came up when we spoke about or spoke to kind of surfers against sewage and a lot of the other protest groups. They talked about capital investment, and at a simplistic level for me, it seemed that if Southern Water were to build enormous great bund tanks at Bud's farm to capture that overspill, then it wouldn't jettison straight into Langston Harbour. So I guess the question is, they've come up with a very fancy investment arrangement. Is there anything you can shed light on as to why they were able to do that rather than invest in what seemed like some fairly simple capital investment to stop sewage flooding straight into the harbour?
Well, if you replace all of that pipeline and that Victorian system that they've got right the way through Portsmouth and beyond, and you stop all of these leaks, this nearly 20% of leaks, you don't end up with more infrastructure and a bigger portfolio. You don't have anything extra. You've just replaced what's existing. But if you have £1 billion wastewater recycling project, then suddenly you've got £1 billion more worth of resource, of capital. I think that's got to be part of the reason that they've decided to go for something extra instead of something better. They don't want to replace something, they want something more. They want a bigger portfolio, they don't want the existing one. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, and it goes back to the point that Philippa pointed out previously. Bear in mind, the bigger that number is, the bigger the service of the debt is. It's that simple.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I get that, but if for instance, if Southern Water invested £1 billion in bund overflow tanks, that would stop the sewage, the overflow and the surge capacity going into the harbour. They would still have invested £1 billion, which they would have borrowed off their parent company, and their customers would be servicing the debt. I guess I'm just trying to. I'm scratching my head a bit.
The bund thing. They are building overflow tanks, but they're limited on space, so they can only do so much. I mean, the water is coming from the fact that we have our house sewage and what's coming off the road are not separated, so they all go out together. So that's a lot of the issue. But what's happening here is the water company are abusing our regulatory system. Because that is underneath it all. That's what's going on. They find all the holes. I mean, there's more holes than there are on the Cllr, and they are exploiting every single one. I get it when they say, "Oh, it's Ofwat's fault," because we have been sleeping at the wheel in terms of regulation. In terms of this company, we're allowed to buy another company. Having bankrupt one, they're able to go and buy another water company. Excuse me. Somebody's taking their eye off the ball there. And
in fairness to Ofwat,
they are not statutory. Water companies are not statutory consultees when we come to putting in new developments. All they have to do is say, yes, we will connect you, but they're not allowed to say, well, actually, we haven't got the capacity to treat your sewage. No, you just have to carry on doing it. So that's again a regulatory thing that is wrong. So Bud's Farm is one of their biggest ones, but over Thornham, they have capacity there to actually do it, but the manager there said to somebody a couple of years ago, I'd love to build more tanks, but they've told me I'm not allowed to.
I have to say, Ian, people like yourself and Paul will know more about this than I will, but surely by having this £1 billion infrastructure, by inserting that into Bedhampton, into Havant, which is Philippa's ward, by the way, I think, isn't it, that it's going into, Philippa?
I've got a bit to say about that.
Well, surely that's better for shareholders. And would we have, the question is, would we have this moral dilemma, this issue, if it was under public ownership?
No, I mean, I can't disagree with any word of that. I mean, fundamentally, Britain is, I believe, still the only country in the world that privatised water. And there's a simple reason for that. It's not a business. You will end up with the deregulatory race to the bottom. And that's exactly what's happened. You've had a government for a number of years has a laissez-faire economic model that believes that this is the best route to deliver for consumers, and it has failed. It has just abjectly failed. This is not a business, or it certainly doesn't return the best for the consumer being run as a business.
Did you have something to add there, Philippa?
Yes, boring point again, because I like them. It's not really Ofwat's fault. They can only do what they were set up to do and what is covered by legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So their focus has to be on keeping bills low, apart from when water companies want to indulge in big recycling projects. But also want to make the point that none of us are actually against the reservoir. We really like the reservoir we were promised, but we recognise the need for it, and it hopefully will still be a big asset for Havant. But yes, I live in Bedhampton, and that's where the Southern Water want to put this huge recycling plant. They can't tell me how big it will be, which is a bit strange, but we fear that it will be enormous. Certainly Bedhampton is going to be have pipes run through it. Some of it will be done by tunnelling, which sort of should be okay, but there's surprising the number of compounds they have to build to support that, and how big those compounds will be. And there's a great debate at the moment about whether they've got permission for dual pipelines, which are needed to fill the reservoir and draw down from it for Southern Water's use. Yes, I could talk about this for hours. I'm fighting to get them to Bedhampton. We're going to have pipelines, but I really want to minimise the impact.
It seems there is behind the overall theory. There's some quite clearly some kind of political, ideological differences in regards to how the industry is kind of set up and regulated and how it's run, but also some very, to use your phrase, Philippa, for some very kind of nerdy technical points. But is there kind of one thing that you'd want government to actually, you say legislation is kind of what's stopping off what being tougher or demanding more? What would be the one thing you'd want the government to do, I guess, is what legal button should they press?
Renationalise water.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, for a Green, I'm not necessarily kind of going to jump on that one, because when it's state-owned, as it is in Northern Ireland, that's been another disaster. It's because you have to make sure the state is prepared to pay, and that was the original reason why Margaret Thatcher said, "Oh my God, this is going to cost a lot of money. I've got to get rid." But I would say it's kind of a change in direction, which is to change Ofwat's brief to sustainable and environmentally correct water sourcing, rather than just, make it cheap. And actually, this is not going to be cheap. And the other thing is to beef up the EA, because the Environmental Agency was cut to ribbons, and I think it was 2008-10, that period. They lost a huge number of staff. And they are getting a little bit of money now, because apparently the fines are going to the EA. So the EA is now starting to do a bit more measuring and on the job. But part of the reason this has happened is because the EA have not been able to monitor.
But their budget dropped by 40% in the last 14 years, didn't it, up to July? I mean, I have to say that I think public ownership would be good, but the great Anthony Crossley wouldn't disagree with you, Grainne. He said that actually the government holds the reins, they make the rules, and maybe that's where it's a very poignant question actually from Simon, is what would you do? I'd bring it under public ownership. It doesn't actually answer the question, I suppose. What would you do to make things tighter and to stop people taking the mick? Can I just have one thing? I think it's it's good that we haven't gone down the lazy politics route of blaming the Conservatives for passing this in 2021, because because we could have done
Well, you
that.
just did that, didn't
Well,
you,
no,
Mark?
no,
Yes,
but
it's very clever.
but we can't do that, because actually I think it was Portsmouth Waters, that none of the complications imposed by this, this enormous project and wastewater recycling were actually involved at that point. It has been hijacked by Southern Water since that point, and they they didn't know actually what they had in mind.
You've got a good example here, guys, actually, of the Progressive Alliance having a debate amongst itself together, actually.
Absolutely, and whilst I think we can splash about in the water for hours,
It's time to go to housing.
we do
Hopefully
need to
not
move it on
recycled
to
water, though, please, Ian.
Exactly. No, I'm not splashing about in Langston Harbour, not quite at this point.
Not right now, don't do it.
No, absolutely. So this brings us on to housing. Obviously, housing, very hot topic. And it's obviously a pressing need for the borough. Obviously, need to fit more houses in and avoid people being priced out. So, Philippa, can you give us some insight into what's happening in the world of housing?
Right. Just to be clear, we can't fit enough houses into Havant Borough. We're pretty much full. What the Lib Dem solution is to build new towns, like Wellbourne, being built on the other side of Fareham. It's a great example. You've got to build a whole town with all the facilities you need. What happens at the moment is we desperately need more houses. Nobody's arguing with that. You build around the edges of towns and people are a long way from the centre. They don't have the infrastructure. They can't get to the doctors, etc., etc. But as a coalition, we're really passionate about doing something. We want to actually see a lot more social housing, not necessarily affordable housing. That's a bit of a con. This is Paul's favourite subject. But proper social housing that will get people into their own home and cut into the homeless problem, and especially the invisible homelessness turns into sofa surfing. So we've got some ambitions to for the borough to acquire more housing and go as far as we can, finances permitting, to actually start building one day.
Perfect. So if I can just flick the focus onto Hayling Island, obviously, Mark, if I can come to you, there's some plans that might see some agricultural land freed up for more housing. How do you feel being on Havant, which probably has more green space than most in the borough?
Well, I must admit, I feel like I want us to be Pimlico. Let's just cut the bridge in half and set ourselves off into the horizon. There are sites already purchased, earmarked. It's going to be very difficult to push back against those. I'm going to do my best. I feel like I'm retreating into Hayling with all the residents that are quite cross about this, because there is just the one arterial road. We haven't, it's often blocked, which creates an issue. And then we have storms like we have lately, and the ferry's not an option either. I don't think that we have the infrastructure. I think that we should be defined as a rural settlement. I'd like to see that happen. I know that in Dover, they very carefully categorised each ward, and they've said that it's out of character, it's inappropriate, it's in a place that lacks infrastructure in certain zones. And I think that we're one of those. And selling, if we look at the broader issue and connected to something that was a bit spiky lately, and the farmers' tax, I do also think that we need to look at the stats last year, which were that 56% of agricultural land sold was to developers, and half of what was left was to investors. It's rapidly disappearing. We know we need, along with energy, a little bit of independence in terms of the amount of food we produce, and to bring it back to what it was in the 80s, 90s, we were more about like 80% of all the food that we consumed was from here. I think we need to move back to that model in a very worrying, shifting international landscape that's really uncertain. I don't like seeing agricultural land generically sold off, but particularly on Hayling Island, obviously, because of the added issues.
Can I just chip in, as it's Hayling as well? I got elected literally on a slogan of no development without investment. And it is literally that. It's not an aversion to development at all. It is just recognising that an island is a place that effectively has got a moat around it. It's got one route on, it's got one route off. There are huge areas, if you speak to our coastal engineers in this area, huge areas of the island that are under immediate and short to mid-term flood risk. You can't, if we compare it with where you guys are just over there at the moment, because it certainly comes up from residents on Hayling a lot. There's been a £170 million investment in Portsmouth to protect Portsmouth, and that's essentially to protect housing. Now, if you apply the same principle to development on housing, then you have to build a similar level and have a similar level investment if you're actually going to protect in the long term housing. You simply can't look at it as a location on a flood zone at the moment for potential housing. The Lib Dem policy Philippa just outlined, and Philippa knows because she's literally heard me saying this for the last decade or so. The Lib Dem policy is now what I've been banging on about for 10 years, which is literally anything other than just building enough property and building it in new places where there is land. Britain is 94% empty. Said this many, many times before. The reason why developments historically have actually just been piled onto the areas that already have a denser population is one, fundamentally the central government model is broken. Rather than doing what humans have done throughout history, which is space ourselves out, we've had a model which deliberately jams everyone in as sardines. And secondly, I forgot on my second point. Literally, let me come back to you in just a second.
Yeah, and I guess just to pick up on that, Paul, and perhaps Philippa, I can come back to you because you've both
cheapness. Sorry to interrupt, but again, you put things where there are already things, and you get away with saving money. Basically, if you build 6 new houses tucked away on a field on Hayling somewhere, no one quite notices. But of course, there is a need for more capacity at the health centre. There is more capacity needed on the roads, etc., etc., etc. Historically, it's been cheaper not to provide those things. It's been cheaper not to build new towns because you don't have to add those things. But in the end, again, it's like any short-termism and any short-term money saving. It comes back to bite you in the arse, basically. It's not a money saver at all, really. It's just a short-term political game that some people can get away with that someone else has to fix at a later date.
And I guess on that thing with new towns, perhaps if I can come back to yourself, Philippa. I mean, you mentioned for the back of Fareham and Wellbourne. I think I've heard the name Wellbourne probably for at least 15 years, possibly 20. And I drive past that part every day on my way. I don't drive, but we drive past it on our way to work. It doesn't appear to look much more like a town than it did 15 years ago. Is there, it doesn't, whilst that might be the solution, it doesn't seem to be able to move at any sort of pace where new housing estates get thrown up in Havant and Hayling, in less than a year.
Without the infrastructure that they need. I've not followed Wellbourne in that much detail, but yes, it does take time to do things properly and plan things out. But no, Fred, I can't shed much light on that.
No worries.
I do think if I could chip in again that part of the delay has been that actually down there, and I don't, like Philippa, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but there's been a council trying to act. We hope there will be far more steer in this direction from central government. At the moment, the model adopted by this new government has at the moment been a very crude tool, effectively, to just increase the numbers, the requirement of housing, but operating under the same model. We hope there will be significant more drive for this model from central government. But because ultimately, otherwise, we are just literally cramming ourselves in like sardines more and more effectively. And that's not what human beings want or need, basically. It's not what human beings actually thrive for.
Perfect. If I can throw to Simon.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I guess I
haven't said anything yet.
Oh, sorry, Grainne.
Oh, sorry, Grainne. Yeah, I didn't mean to skip over you there.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
Please feel free to come in.
Well, I'm the only one who's sitting on planning, and I'm sort of on the local plan thing, and I'm just going to stick to Hayling because what we really need from the new national planning policy framework is that the value and the necessity of protecting best BMV land, I've forgotten exactly what this is, it's not in there, it never has been in there, and it's got to go in there. It is a kind of a myth that we have the land. Well, the developers have land banked enough land to build 1 million houses. Our surrounding councils have a duty to cooperate. Well, they haven't done that. In fact, they've done the very opposite, which is, oh, we'll build all around Havant. And guess what? Who's going to have their schools, their roads, all the stuff, not putting in the infrastructure, doing the very opposite and landing it all, which is an incredibly constrained borough. It's really, really built up. It's 56% built up. Well, the average for councils over the country is actually 6%. So that just shows just how urban Havant has become. So I'll just leave it there to say that we must put in the environment, we must put in sustainability and the land banking. Also, we've got 1 million empty homes.
Well, I guess the other thing, Grainne, just a specific point on Emsworth, because I think many people wouldn't perhaps would see Emsworth as perhaps different to Havant. It has a sort of almost a sort of village identity. Is there a risk with the development that the identity of Emsworth, as the developments creep closer to it, that the actual identity of Emsworth itself will be lost?
A lot of Emsworth residents would agree with exactly that, because the gap between Emsworth and Havant has gone. The only reason they haven't built on the south side of the A259 is because it's in the Chichester Harbour Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty, which has been renamed to something else. But that's the only reason that's not been built on yet. We'll watch this space. And the gap between Westbourne and Emsworth is disappearing. The gap between Southbourne and Emsworth is disappearing. So you're absolutely right. There is a real danger that the very thing that makes Emsworth what it is getting lost because of the development all around it.
Thank you, Grainne. And apologies for missing you first time round. Simon.
Okay, thank you. So so there's lots of things we've covered there. What are the big ticket things that we should watch out for in the next 6 months that's on Havant Borough Council's radar?
Can I jump in? Yeah. Can I jump in with my nerd hat?
Yeah, you go for it.
We haven't mentioned national government very much. Mm-hmm. They are really going to town. Angela Rayner's convinced that if she amalgamates a lot of local government and has far fewer authorities to deal with, things will be much better and much more efficient. Well, she is just wrong. Current government do not understand local government, especially the way it works in the south. We are likely to become part of a metropolitan combined authority, which probably nobody will notice, but we'll have a metro mayor somewhere up in the clouds at a very high level, sorting out transport across the region, as far as I can tell. That's not enough. Government wants to push us all into being unitary authorities. So Havant will get glued together at some point, possibly, with surrounding boroughs like Fareham and Gosport. Who knows? But as somebody said in a meeting on Friday, we don't think our residents are actually going to man the barricades to save their local district or borough. So, much as the local government, current government like or unitaries, I don't think they'll wear Hayling as a unitary authority. Anyway, So also as Cabinet Lead for Finance, of course, got the budget coming up in March. So that's going to be hard work. And hopefully this will be a launch pad for some of our more ambitious projects, because if we don't get all our ambitious schemes going soon, what with government deciding to shake up local government, we may never get another chance. But however, I shall now disappear down my nerd rabbit hole and let everybody else talk about other things.
So this is the coalition's first budget, obviously. So this is the kind of the key thing to watch, what different decisions you'd be making than the previous Conservative administration.
Yeah, it is, and I don't think that the idea when you budget is to try and build the biggest reserve possible. Actually, I think it's to actually use the money that you've got to help residents. although some of the Conservatives seem to disagree, which is bizarre to me. You need some reserves, obviously, but actually you need to flex your muscles and fix problems with good solutions. I was going to say that I think the easy answer to all of this is actually what somebody else mentioned offline before, is the local plan, which brings a lot of the things that we've talked about this evening all together. I think that it's got the potential to solve a lot of issues long term. In terms of, well, the other day that we passed, Grainne will tell you more about that, the Hayling Island Coastal Management Strategy, that will fit into it.
Sorry, I'm just replying to your wife. She wants to know you do.
What Southern Water have got have got planned, and of course all the issues. We've got 2,000 people on the waiting list for housing. I mean, it's a significant issue. We do need houses, but we're hitting nearly 60%, I think, aren't we, in terms of coverage? And so it's going to be a challenge, but it's the most important thing coming up.
Yeah, I would agree with Philippa in that the budget is the thing that's going to impact people the most. It's where we set our priorities within what is possible. We will never be able to deliver what people want or even what they need. And it's always going to be a compromise. And whatever compromise we hit on, somebody's going to lose out. I also agree with Philippa that this mayoral system is a disaster for democracy, if I may say so, because in fact, people on Hayling, people in Emsworth, want a town council. They want more local control, and here we've got something that's doing the very opposite. And the people who are pushing this would point to London and Manchester. Well, it couldn't be less like us down here. I mean, these are two big metropolitan areas, which also have the advantage of being Victorian or earlier and have infrastructure and all sorts of things that we are not getting because we're developing later. If you go back to the 40s, Havant was 40,000 people. Now we're up to 24,000. And we're getting none of the things. We've no university, we've no schools. We have schools, but they're not the centres of high level learning. We don't have any of that sort of stuff. It's just I'm just really cross about it because I think it's really removing the local voice from local decisions. And because this again is, please listen. That's what I think the problem with politics is. Are you listening? No.
Well,
I actually personally
No,
I actually personally have no problem with the breaking up of the current system necessarily, but I do think what is being proposed at the moment is very, very clumsy. I mean, it was the ancient Greeks who recognised that basically when you get beyond about 15,000-20,000 people as a demos, they stop to feel genuinely represented. So I'm all in favour of some sort of system which does tie in more localism and more local representation into a newer tier that is perhaps bigger than Havant Borough itself. But if you're going to do that, the flip side is that you have to, and I guess in a way there's almost an argument here about the world itself and about greater internationalism equally requiring greater localism at the same time. And I can press the Lib Dem button and do that speech. You have to actually have that greater degree of local or localized autonomy if you are going to also have that greater degree of wider, expansive collectivism.
Well, I think on that note, Paul, the localism of Havant, and we've had a good chunk represented today, and thank you all for coming on. And it sounds like whatever happens in the next 6 months, it isn't going to be dull, and it sounds like there are enough new, exciting and challenging things coming through that I'm sure we'll have you on again next year and see how you're doing a year into the new project. So thank you all for coming on. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests this evening have been Paul Gray,
Thank you.
Mark Coates, Philippa Gray and Grainne Rason Bradley. Thank you very much all. I've been Simon Sansbury. Please do make sure to follow, comment, subscribe, etc. where you want. Send biscuits if you like. We can be bribed with tea. Join us next week at 6:27 on Sunday when we'll be Actually, what are we doing next week? Are we looking at Portsmouth City
Well,
Council's
look,
full meeting, or we might not, depending on what's on the agenda. We might do it
if it
afterwards
looks-
and do something else. So
Yeah, it depends how dull it looks. So
Depend- yeah,
we
depends
wouldn't
how
want to
dull the
bring you.
agenda
We
is.
wouldn't want.
If
We wouldn't
it's
want to
really
bring you a
dull,
dull
we
show.
might not talk
Yeah.
about it at all. We just pretend it's not there. So anyway, but thank you very much all. Please do like, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.